Hello, and thanks for staying with us on People, Politics, and Power. I am Imoni Amarere. It's nice being with you again on this brand new week. And today, we will be looking at Nigeria's foreign policy. Nigeria is a sovereign nation and a member of the international community with full competencies to enter into legal instruments at multilateral and bilateral levels. Having been admitted to as the 99th member of the United Nations on October 7, 1960. As a sovereign nation, Nigeria has signed several multilateral agreements at the global, regional, and even sub-regional levels. Nigeria has also, over the years, entered into several bilateral agreements or reciprocate covenants with select nations as well as international or regional bodies. Some treaties and even conventions which Nigeria entered into have to be domesticated to make them enforceable. Some of those legislations include treaties, as Treaties Making Procedure Act, the International Financial Organizations Act, Consular Convention Act, and International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes Act. The collaboration between the executive and the legislature in formulating a deed of agreement with other countries has shown how sensitive treaties could be in shaping foreign policy. Now, while the principle of national interest takes precedence in formulating foreign policy, the rate at which Nigeria enters into formal agreements in the name of treaties, according to experts, may not augur well for the nation. Now, for instance, about 100 treaties have been signed since the restoration of democratic rule in 1999. How many of these treaties have been domesticated? What effect do they have if and when they are domesticated? Now, are the treaties too many? And in a strict sense, what is the nexus between foreign policy and enforcement of treaties? Is Nigeria reaping from the treaties? The very many treaties that entered into, is it reaping from them any benefits? Are some of them not due for review to bring them up to speed with the present global and economic realities? Well, joining me in the studio to discuss this issue is Professor Isaac Obasi. Professor Obasi is a professor of public policy, a political scientist who has taught courses in international law and political science at the University of Botswana. Botswana is in Southern Africa. He has also taught at the Ottoman Danfodio University in Sokoto, Northwest Nigeria, and the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, in Southeast Nigeria. Thank you so much, Professor Obasi, for finding time to join us.
Thank you, sir.
Now, well, before we begin our discussion, let's take some time and take some bites from a stakeholders meeting of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in Abuja, which focused on the turning issue of election sequence for 2019 and beyond. You know, this is an issue that has been on the table and on the front burner of discussions. And if, as we hear now, some political parties have actually dragged the INEC, the National Assembly, and the Attorney General of the Federation to court over this issue of election sequence. Now, this is a pre-election year, 2018, and of course, it's to be expected that a lot of these election-related issues will dominate our discussion at one point or the other, and in fact, even hit the courts, as we're already beginning to see. Let's take a listen.
On the 9th of January
this year, we issued the timetable and schedule of activities for the 2019 general elections based on our powers under extant laws, and nothing has changed. The election will begin with the Presidential and National Assembly on the 16th of February, followed by the state governorship, state assembly, and the FCT area council elections on the 2nd of March. We have already informed you that there is a principle behind the choice of these dates. As our democracy matures, we should move to certainty, away from uncertainty. And so the dates for future elections in the country have been fixed by the Commission for the third Saturday of the month of February of the election year, which in 2019 is the 16th of February, followed 2 weeks later by the state governorship and state assembly elections, which in 2019 falls on the 2nd of March.
Professor Yakubu, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission there. Now, what are the likely threats to Nigeria's general election in 2019? A panel assessed the preparations for this upcoming election. Let's take a listen.
As if we must have to do it and there is no time, let President Buhari let us agree, have one more extra year. From this tenor, let us fix these things. Let us fix it right and do it correctly so that Nigeria, just a minute, just a minute, just a minute, just a minute.
It's democracy. People have the right to.
Just a minute. This is not tenor elongation. Where I come from, if you cut a tree and water is still coming out of that tree, it has not dried up. So let us not pretend. Nigeria is more divided now than a few years back. And I don't want us to go for an election this way.
All right.
Let the president bring everybody back. Let us unite the country. And then go.
What the previous speaker is suggesting is extra-constitutional. And you cannot build democracy on extra-constitutional means. So really, I don't think that, for me, that is the option. As far as I'm concerned, we need incremental positive changes. We must prevent a reversal. And most importantly, the greatest threat to our democracy, it seems to me, emanates from our politicians. We must find ways and the means of containing their recklessness, because that is what is capable of undermining and draining our democratization process. And most importantly, another threat is voter apathy. So the civil society organizations and all stakeholders have to reinforce their commitment to getting people to come out to exercise their vote in the belief and confidence that their vote will count.
An issue that will continue to echo and re-echo as we move nearer the 2019 elections. So back to our focus for today. I'm joined in the studio, as I told you earlier on, by Professor Isaac Obasi. Professor Obasi is a political scientist, a professor of public policy, who has taught international law, political science in very many, at least 3 universities. One at the University of Botswana in Southern African region. Back home here, he has taught at the Otman Danfodio University in Sokoto and the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. Professor Isaac Obasi, thank you so much for finding time to join us. Let's begin on an educative note. What are treaties?
Well, we can say generically treaties are international agreements. And They can take many names like conventions, protocols, covenants, even a change of letters between states. But technically, we must define treaties from the point of view of the Vienna Convention on Law of Treaties, 1969. In May that year, that Treaty of Treaties, that's what it's called, was concluded and made open for states to ratify. We define treaty from that point of view as an international agreement concluded by states. And based on this agreement by states, it must take a form of written document. It must be in written form. And again, it must be regulated or governed by international law. That point is very important. So when a state and another state enter into a treaty, it must be within the confines of this law, international law governing it. And what it means is that in international law, you have main 6 sources. Treaties constitute one of them, where you can say, okay, where are the sources of law? In the municipal law, which is laws of any nation, the sources can come from the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, etc., etc. So we know that one. But international law is also multifarious. So we have treaties, we have customs. We have general principles, recognized principles of law that civilized men and states recognize that these are recognizable. You have writings of publicists, and these are experts, jurists, and sometimes diplomats who have demonstrated enough intellectual capacity in the field and have shown that, in fact, they can contribute, and internationally they are also respected. You also have equity as a source. So 6 of them. So now we are focusing on treaties. What it means is that it is an agreement voluntarily, that point is important, voluntarily entered by states. And by Vienna Convention, it is between states only. In other words, when you are introducing, you talk about multilateral and bilateral.
Yes.
Now, this bilateral.
Okay.
Then, when by that's 1969 Vienna Convention. But 1986 Vienna Convention, that one is between states and international organizations, or even between international organization and international organization, between maybe regional, sub-regional, and regional. So, but we are focusing today mainly the ones between states, but we can take it to also multilateral, which is very important. When you talk about sub-regional organization like ECOWAS, AU, continental, and then global, United Nations. So if it's voluntary, it doesn't mean you can just enter and move out. It is also regarded as binding. And
yeah, that's the point I was coming to.
Yes.
How binding are treaties for states that enter into them?
It is very important. It is in Article 26 of the Vienna Convention specifically says, and it uses Latin word. Let me put in English first. It says agreements must be obeyed or respected. Good. And the Latin word there is facta sunt servanda. That servanda means that if you enter an agreement, it is binding, and is one of the longest and oldest time-honored principle of international law. You know, I was talking about customs, treaty. It's one of the longest principles that treaties must be obeyed, enforced, and adhered to, which means that binding force is critical. The Vienna Convention is called Treaty of Treaties. And because it's called Treaty of Treaties, it regulates every other. It governs every other treaty, bilateral and multilateral. And because it's like that, it specifically says any country, two countries now bilaterally that enter into a contract, they must look back at this convention to see what they're entering into. Because this treaty governs them. And part of the thing that is very critical is that it is binding. It must be obeyed.
Are treaties reviewable?
Oh, excellent. The same Vienna Convention makes provision for this. In fact, it provides anything you can talk of A to Z. If you want to review. If you want to revise, you revise. If you want to make a declaration, which may not be objection, but you want to make a statement that you want the international community that entered into that agreement to look at, to see whether they can review, it is also allowed. If you want to make an objection, it's also allowed, but usually objections are welcomed when you are signing the convention and putting it in what is called a depository. That depository, if it's bilateral, may be one of the countries where it is signed, it will be kept at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If it is a multilateral agreement, it has to be with the General Secretary General of the United Nations. That's where the depositories of that one, is located. So it is very important. It can be reviewed, yes. But usually, if you want to do that, there is a procedure too.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, are treaties subject to municipal laws?
Oh, excellent.
In other words, because every now and then we
Yeah.
talk about domestication of treaties.
Excellent.
What is the process
Yeah.
for domesticating treaties, international treaties,
Yeah.
and how subject are they to the municipal laws of each state that is entering into that treaty?
Okay, let's see it this way. If a state is entering into a treaty, bilaterally for instance, they must have seen mutual benefit both of them will have. And if those benefits are there, both sides must anchor what they are looking for in a treaty from the point of view of the national interest. In fact, one of the principles of our own foreign policy, today you look at it, even chapter 2 of the Constitution, nothing like that Constitution as amended, which specifies the directive principles of state policy. One of the things there is that our foreign policy must promote and protect national interests, first and foremost. So you look at your national interests, what your laws, permit, and what they ask you to achieve before you go to the international community to enter into a treaty, whether bilateral or multilateral. And let me put it this way. The way you frame the question is that the municipal law will be determining it. Let's look at it both sides. They reinforce each other. If you are going there, you must go there from the point of view of your own laws that are permissible in your own territory, that is promoting your economic, political, social, educational, whatever cultural interests you have. So as you are going into a treaty, you are going there to promote your national interest, which is also within the confines of the municipal law. Then, let us look at it from the other side. From this other side, we can use a theory of policy transfer or policy diffusion, meaning that a country can look at what is happening outside its shores and say, okay, let's do policy shopping, or bandwagonism. That was what bandwagonism. It can happen, where you see others taking what you call best practice. You say, oh, this is good for us. You go and take. So you can, when you were introducing this program today, you find out that legitimate concerns have been raised, that many treaties have been entered into. Yes, but what is there is that the basis for entering them might be justified at that time. Perhaps you may say later on, dynamics of things would have knocked off some of these interests. But you are free to raise objection and say, look, these are things you may want to consider in terms of revision, in terms of declarations, which will be considered. Because you don't just pull out. No, it is not easy to pull out. Because as you have entered it, you must respect it. Then trying to now make a case for pulling out just like that is not easy. So policy transfer theory, we can use it to say, let us borrow what is happening outside. And this can enable you to emulate, to diffuse policy, borrow, adapt, and you can also call it policy fit instead of policy best practice. So best practice is that you can copy what is not of interest to you. You say it's best practice, but you can do what you call best fit. So when you look at it happening there, you synthesize it, and you can do hybridization. You have a hybrid. You look at what is happening. Okay, this is good for us. You can then begin to now domesticate. Domestication process is a means of making the law become part and parcel of you. Let me use the ordinary word like institutionalization. In other words, when you institutionalize things, a practice within your own system, you are trying to make it part of you. It's no longer alien. It's not strange to you. In this case, the ratification you are not forced to ratify. Willingly, you went and ratified. If you have ratified and signed through a plenipotentiary or your representative, it means you should be ready to also obey it, because you have seen the thing being in line with your domestic law. And when you bring it in now, you also see that there are certain things that may not entirely, because a treaty may have, say, or okay, 30 articles. Maybe 25 may be what is applicable and useful to you. You domesticate them. You don't. Those other ones, you object to them. The objection is given to object.
Yes.
And United States does this often. Yes, but at the point of you are signing, you say this one, our domestic law doesn't permit us to do it. They will record it. But you're not saying you are not ratifying the
entire treaty.
You ratify the treaty.
But there are articles of the
exactly.
treaty that you make exceptions
exactly.
to.
But let me know exactly. Rather than say pick and choose, exception is better.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next question that is playing in my mind is to say, what happens if you ratify a treaty at the international level and you do not necessarily domesticate it back home? Because some of the treaties will require parliamentary approval. Some might just be executive endorsement, and that carries it. I mean that makes it legal. But right. Some of them are so weighty that it requires parliamentary approval for it to become legal and binding.
You are right, because the word domestication is you can't domesticate without the legislative arm of government, making the law relevant to the municipal setting. The issue there is actually ratification is seen as, if you ratify, you are enforcing. You are compliant.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily. It's just a necessary condition. Many countries have ratified because bandwagonism I was talking about. Others are going that way. They don't want to look different. And they say, okay, let's go and sign. You sign. You are not ready to ratify. All over the world, researches have been done in terms of whether ratification actually promotes compliance. It's been found out that the abnormal situation applies. Many treaties have been ratified and yet are not complied with. Evidence exists. But it's also shown that many treaties that are ratified have actually helped those countries that ratified them to improve. There are maybe, what do you call it, let's call it your profile. Your rating is high. For instance, you don't want to be seen to be autocratic, authoritarian. You want to be seen to be democratic, where others, you go and sign. You may sign and look the other way around. Okay? Like a country like us that is very heterogenic, you know the National Assembly you pointed out earlier is really where the problem is. They will know that this thing will have some problem, maybe culturally. Some sections of the country may not be interested in actually. But as a country as a whole, let them look nice in the eyes of the international community. Because international relations is all about promoting interstate cooperation, stability, peace, security. So they don't want to be seen to be anti these time-honored and cherished values at the international level. So they will go and sign. But when you now bring it into domesticate, they say, no, this one is against our culture, against our religion, against our value. You have this happening here. But sometimes too, the government, whether it's the executive or legislative arm, they are not ready to go and ratify. But because of the pressure, something you can call as, you call them policy transfer entrepreneurs or agents, like civil society organizations, NGO. They want to pressurize you. Please do this. You may go and sign and ratify. When you ratify, good. You are expected to comply. But because there is also weak enforcement or monitoring, nobody is checking. There's no domestic police. Even the policy transfer entrepreneurs we mentioned now might be benefiting and advocating for that. But when it is domesticated, when it is ratified, they just relax. They start fighting for other things where they get maybe resources to make them to exist. And so it's like that in theory. Ratification does not, or domestication does not ultimately translate into enforcement.
Enforcement.
Yes, and in compliance. So what happens now in reality is that there is this contention between groups that are interested to get the thing implemented. So they keep on pushing for the domestication. Because if you domesticate it, states within, like ours in the federation, we now have the thing. The states who feel they will benefit more will be ready to fast begin to implement it. So for a country like ours, I can say that from experience, you can allow that divergent opinion that will play out in the National Assembly. That whenever a seemingly useful, beneficial treaty is entered into, to domesticate it, they will become a cog in the wheel of progress there. But at the executive level, they can be doing certain things to show that they are really in line with that treaty.
At what stage, now that we have talked about it, at what stage and at what level are non-state actors involved in international treaties?
Yeah, you know, they are not subject of international law. It states. They are states. It's subject of international law. But in the municipal law, you can get them citizens and other actors. But when it comes to international law, states are the main subjects of international law. So what they can do is to pressurize. And they constitute a definitive and strong force in the United Nations. Non-state actors are recognized. They are very important. They play very important role in drawing attention to what states are even neglecting. So they can, but they have no kind of legal binding role to play. They can only pressurize or use the word advocate and pressurize. That's all. They cannot, they are not states.
Now, you have said that, I mean, at the municipal level, there are no no policemen, so to say, policemen in quote now, to ensure compliance with these treaties that are entered into. Likewise, at the international level, there are no known international police force to ensure that states that enter into treaties comply with them. Like we have explained, some people simply ratify, sign, and look the other way, and because they just want to be compliant with international tradition
they just copy and paste.
Practices. Yes.
Okay.
So
that is true. The observation is very right. But let me modify that statement as taken literally in a way. The absence of what I call the enforcer, we cannot completely say there is some absence. There is some indirect way of putting pressure for you to comply. Let's go multilateral now. Multilateral.
Yes.
Let's look at the ILO, where you have fundamental conventions, the child labor convention, the right to organize by trade unions, the right to collective bargaining. You know, these things are there. They are fundamental convention. If you have entered into them, ratified, you are expected to begin to implement. There is a sense in which a pressure is put on you, an invisible policeman, but it's visible. ILO has office here. That office that is here, it monitors how these countries that have ratified the thing, how they implement this. For instance, they monitor, you know, how child labor, the country is not trying to help to curb child labor. They take statistics. In fact, you'll be surprised that every single day, some of these organizations take statistics of what is happening in a paper here. They can take about 10 papers, employ somebody whose work is tell us violation of this area. You know, strikes, what is happening? How is government treating collective bargaining? When it enters into agreement, collective bargaining, which even though it's governed by municipal law, but you have ratified international convention, you are now bound to obey international law to make sure that social dialogue prevails rather than, you know, strike all the time or lockout. So the presence of international labor organization will now make the government to know that they really have to comply, because at the end of at the middle of every year, you know, they meet in what do we call it?
In Geneva.
Yeah, in Geneva. They meet there, and country reports are given. Of course, the General Secretary again of the ILO will give his own report, and that report is an amalgamation of what they collect from all the states. So they have a picture. If possible, they make a trend. If you use graph, you can say, oh, this is how we are going. Countries are not implementing. So there is this kind of invisible policeman, if you like, But it's there, but you don't find them always going to you to tell you you are violating this or that. Because of the way international relations is governed by protocols, civil behavior, etiquette, they try to be nice. You can see an international organization staff who is here will tell the company, oh, you are doing very well, but at the end they say, we need to do more. But the moment they need to do more, you know that in fact you have up to 70% thing to do. That's a way to tell you politely that there are many things to do. They are very polite.
In diplomatic language.
Yeah, exactly. You got the phrase. You got the phrase.
All right, let's bring this back home to Nigeria.
Yes.
Where, as we understand, well over 100 treaties have been entered into between 1999 and now, since our return to democratic rule.
Yes, very interesting.
Now, if that's the case, I mean, one begins to wonder how those treaties are interacting or interfacing with our national foreign policy objectives.
Yeah, that's a very important. When you were giving the background, I laughed because I looked at Vienna Convention that was ratified in, I think that was May, 1969. By, I think, July, Nigeria had ratified. Nigeria was the first country that ratified in the Treaty of Treaties.
The Vienna Convention.
Yes, it was the first country. It ratified in that same 1969. The closest to them was those who ratified in 1970. You talk of Yugoslavia, you talk of Syria, you talk of Jamaica and Canada. 1970.
1969,
yes.
we ratified even
Number
when
one.
we were fighting
yes,
the civil war.
Yes. I asked myself, I said, well, I couldn't do the little research to know whether Tassim Elias, a strong man
yes.
who was out there. So, when you are there and when you are at the international organization, you promote also to show that your country is complying. So I don't know whether he was active in that time to have, first of all, ratified. Nigeria was the first. So we are, but if you project that, you can see that our willingness to ratify could be said to be very high. But I don't want to condemn ratification because to ratify is not easy. They normally study and see what benefit can accrue to us as a nation so that we can promote our national interests. So as much as we ratify, there must be some interest there. But it's worse if you ratify, you are not complying in implementing. That itself is bad. But ratifying is nice when the thing is seen to be promoting international peace and cooperation, whether at domestic level or sub-regional or regional. Because some of these, you can enter them and say, okay, this is good for Africa. Therefore, as Africa's big brother, we can, of the countries, let us ratify and give them leadership because it will help us. If we don't do, there are certain things we may lose. It may not necessarily be to your country. We consider the African country because, like you know, Nigeria has moved over the years with centerpiece from cornerstone in 1960, foreign policy to centerpiece of foreign policy. And today, we have gone beyond just Africa, gone to, under Obasanjo, we looked more global to solve the issue of debt that was plaguing us and other things. So that may influence why you have a lot of treaties. Nigeria is a big country, and there are competing interests within our country that do influence governments that come in. So when they come in, those competing interests may force people to now go and ask the government to go and sign. And before you know it, they have signed. And signing a treaty, you are committing yourself. But now when you are asked to implement it, some of them involves huge amount of resources. You may not even have the resources to implement. And in that case, it becomes a problem. But I want to agree, the statement that Nigeria rushes to sign treaties, I want to agree. Given the multiplicity of what we have, I want to agree. But again, if we don't have any evidence through research that even though we have 100, some other countries don't have beyond 100 or 150, we may not categorically say that Nigeria is really ratifying too fast. But we needed evidence the other side. Yeah.
It is not the ratification, how fast it is that is actually, but the question is, how useful are some of these treaties to Nigeria as a nation? to our economic and political and social well-being, as it were.
That is very good. You know, like I pointed out before, the policy transfer theory allows countries to look beyond their border and see how they can borrow what exists elsewhere that is good to improve their own system. So it is well for us to think that this thing is there. It will benefit us. But without necessarily having a holistic view of that, if researches are not carried on. And this is why it's important for government to be in line with, of course, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs is there. So there should be symbiotic relationship between our foreign ministry and that agency, so that people whose own schedule researching in that area should produce what is needed to advise.
The NIA was actually conceived as a research arm, think tank for Nigeria's foreign policy molders and
precisely. So if they give their advice and say good, they can. The issue there is that some countries borrow ideas coercively, with coercive pressure. Yeah, you know, I say that voluntarily treaties are entered into. But there are some of these things we borrow, which are by coercive means. Let us talk about the ones that go with conditionalities. Donor policy transfer. If you are transferring best practice from donors, they have their conditions. And means you must tinker, if you use the mild word, tinker with your policy, domestic policy environment to be able to accommodate what they are looking for, and you do it. So
and to get what you want from them.
What you want for. Yes, what you are looking from them will be useful. Let me assure you that if you remove some of these donor agencies from this country, I assure you most of these ministries are not doing anything. Yeah, I'm saying that. Most ministries depend on what DFI is going to do for them, UNDP is going to do for them, UNESCO is going to do for them, UNICEF, name them. Who? And so in making their budget, they also give allowance for donor support.
Yeah, a number of African countries, many African countries are aid dependent.
Yes, that's true.
So, of course, their domestic policies would then be influenced substantially
from outside
by the conditionalities that those donor agencies
rather than driven by their national interests.
Exactly.
Yes, that's the point. The issue here is the extent you can marry what your domestic, forces or pressures are, and then how you want also to be a good boy outside there. Because if you see many of the supports we are getting in education, look at just the other day, World Bank announced it's going to give, look at it in Naira, something around millions to catch these our boys on the streets to get back to school.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you get that kind of mouth-watering offer waiting, for you to do some reform, get your acts in order, be progressive in your management outlook, and be able to see that corruption is minimized, you can get that grant. Insofar as they are not going to also fritter it away. So it is very enticing. Many countries will find it difficult to resist what WHO is going to give you, UNICEF is going to offer, UNESCO is going to offer you. So in this sense, you find out that there might be some conditionalities. But let me be fair to say that some of these conditionalities are good, and it's through them we are reforming our systems. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in the past or in analog way of doing things. But they tell you, no, you must have to digitalize. And what's the word, there's a word I'm looking for here now, that definitely will make you to leave your
old ways, and conform with international standards.
Excellent. That is the point. So if you are able to do that through the conditionality, you're also improving yourself in your administrative setup.
Prof, that should take us to another very critical question, which is Nigeria's foreign policy objectives. What does it look like today? Because, like you said at the beginning, we had Africa as cornerstone, Africa as centerpiece. At the state, we had the economic diplomacy. At another state, we had citizens diplomacy.
Excellent.
But many people today are at a loss as to what our foreign policy objectives as a nation?
I
As an expert in
yeah.
that area, what is Nigeria's foreign policy thrust today?
You see, the trust has not left our economic diplomacy in terms of maximization of our economic interest. But you see, the president, the current president, has his own also interest. He has the way he drives the foreign policy. Look at the what do you call it, the visits has made. There are those who argue, because I don't want to say it. In fact, indeed, I'm not an expert in this area to begin to pontificate this fast. But I am well enough literate to know and to say things in that area. There are those who have argued now that the foreign policy trust has shifted to, this closeness with your neighbors. Okay? He has visited Niger how many times? Chad, Cameroon, our neighbors, because of what is happening. Today. Yes, because of what is happening. At least that one is more distant than the ones I'm mentioning, because of Boko Haram. Okay, they're also saying because of the issue of Lake Chad. You really have, a symmetry with these your neighbors. You be on the same page in order to fight a common enemy or common problem.
Which does not deviate from the concentric circle policy trust that we adopted very early on.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Moving in from within,
yes,
and
to go outside.
And growing outside.
Yeah, growing outside. That is true. We cannot say actually we have left the concentric circle. During Ambassador Adeniji, when he was minister, he tried to make this point that, okay, you really have to, of course, open up. Because that's Obasanjo's change in trust. Obasanjo argued that the centerpiece trust is not enough to carry us. Most of the things we need, you don't get it from African countries. And of course, even when it comes to trade, you also know that there's poor relationship in trade. You get that. So you look towards where you globalize. And that brings me the issue of globalization. So we will not take this out of context. When Obasanjo came, globalization was actually beginning to take it, coming to its peak. So it's rightly keyed in. And know that problems that are elsewhere far away may affect you at home. So you try to look beyond Africa. And when you're looking at issue of debt reschedule and the rest of them, it's not Africa that is going to reschedule your debt. There are many things you want to enter into that you needed some multilateral agreement beyond maybe your neighbors to achieve. So we can say that the trust has been changing, but they're not fundamental. That's the only way I've said it. But there are those who have already accepted that this present government, is already shifting the trust towards neighbors. And I don't want to give a stamp of authority to that. It is still contestable.
Yeah, but I asked that question because today, when Donald Trump took over in the U.S., he came up with the America First policy. And the American First policy seemed to be driving his or his administration's foreign policy pursuits globally.
Yes.
Just last week, he came up with the policy on steel and all of that.
2% and 10%.
Yeah, exactly.
Aluminium and steel.
Aluminium and steel.
But that is recklessness. A respected professor, Jeffrey Sachs, is a global professor and drives sustainable development. He has argued, he's written a paper immediately, didn't waste time, that this is reckless ignorance. Trump, he argued, has no history of trade war. If he knew, he didn't learn any lesson out of it. Because he said trade wars that we had in the 30s, 40s, prolonged the depression that really created a problem for the world. That's what he doesn't know. And the man I'm talking about, the professor, was a shadow minister to the guy who was contesting with Mrs. Clinton. You remember his name now?
The gentleman, the senator, who is in the Democratic Party.
Exactly. Yes. So he, assuming the guy won, it's possible that Jeffrey Sachs would have been perhaps the foreign minister, assuming.
The minister, the Secretary of State.
Oh, Secretary of State, that's it. So he knew what he was talking about when he reacted to what Trump has done. It can only give you short-term interest. Long run, they will lose. American, even auto industries will lose. People will also lose their job. There are certain things, and they'll pay more for for cars, automobiles, and the rest of them. So let us not follow Trump. My argument is that Trump can never in any way be used as a point. I read papers and see people I respect calling Trump who did it, therefore we should. That is out of the way. Trump is not in fact, as I'm talking now, I'm wondering why American Congress should not initiate a move to remove Trump before he leads the entire world into a deadly situation. That's the point I'm making.
Yes, the reason I brought that up is to use it in analyzing our own.
Yes, that's why I opened this
here.
paper, is to tell you, to show you now what Nigerian foreign policy is supposed to achieve. And you will see it's not
because
different
here now you have spoken about how we have we seem to place a lot more emphasis on good relations with our neighbors.
Yeah, that's right.
It does seem to me that what is driving that is our security objectives, our security needs. So the terrorist agenda in the sub-region it seems to be the one propelling us to do.
Yeah, I agree partly. Also, partly, I also agree. Assuming you have a president that is not from Daura, will he now order direct a train track to pass outside Nigeria? Definitely not. Are you getting the point now? I want to lend credence to the fact that this concentration with our neighbors also goes beyond just our neighbors because of Boko Haram. There are other things that are doing. Today, NNPC reported to us that 3,000 plus, over 3,000 filling stations at the border. What kind of thing is that in a country? And we are here.
And those filling stations are supplied with smuggled fuel.
Precisely. And of course, they do business there. If you really have somebody who wants to protect this country, we should be talking about how to shield that area. We can't take excuse any longer that our borders are porous. We cannot. These trailers, are they going into the bush before they go to the borders? They are manned. We should stop. I'm using this filling station now to talk about, because it's creating problem with our fuel situation, to talk about how, if we are interested in our neighbors, we should not do that at the risk, at the expense of our own interests. The other day you heard about a refinery going to be cited through collaboration. I mean, you also ask yourself, why outside the country instead of that? So those who are arguing, and I said it before, that those who are persuasively arguing that Nigerian, the trust is changing, and whatever it is, they've not given it the name, but this overemphasis about our neighbors. Some are not comfortable with it. That is the point I was trying to make. I'm trying to illustrate the
It's like a departure from the Obasanjo perspective.
Precisely.
That seems to be more global.
And I don't think we are benefiting a lot there. If we are benefiting, the incursion of terrorists through these porous borders would have been checked. Our neighbors should have been able to checkmate the entry of these people into our country. Rather, what we are seeing is a porousness. The entire internal security is suffering now. And this is an extension of foreign policy failure. That's how one can see it. So this is evidence people who argue that as a change in trust now will be. But I want to, like I said I don't want to support it outright. But if you look at what our policy objectives are, they still remain. I'll give you one: promoting and protection of national interest. That can be questioned. You may have question mark there. What is national interest? Is it regional interest of countries, of people in our country, or in totality our people, or different states? Another one: promotion of African integration and support for African unity. That you can say we are, no question mark. Nigeria is doing well there. Promotion of international cooperation for the consolidation of universal peace and mutual respect among nations, and of course the elimination of discrimination in all these forms. Nigeria is also trying in that aspect. It hasn't deviated.
With all the many peace missions that we get involved in, and UN and even
the next one is respect for international law and the treaty obligation, which is the one we are discussing.
Yes.
Excellent. So Nigeria is also doing that. This respect for treaty obligations, Nigeria is pursuing it, no doubt. But also pursuing the seeking of settlement through dialogue, conciliation, arbitration, and all normal means that do not warrant fighting. So Nigeria is pursuing that. The last one is promotion of just world order. Yeah, that one is contestable because the unjust world order has been existing before I read post science, first degree. So that unjust order is there. They still have to fight it. because the developed nations are using us as a cannon fodder. Look at what has happened in the Security Council. They've agreed for a truce, a ceasefire in Syria, and today they are still killing.
Ghouta, yes.
Yeah, and that means they are not respecting the feelings of others and sensitivity of other nations.
But that's always the situation with wars.
Yeah.
That you see parties who claim to be respecters of international law suddenly deviating from that path, and because in Ghouta, for instance, in Syria today, you have the Americans, you have the Syrians, you have the Russians.
Precise, all of them there.
All of them are there, and all of them seem to be violating international treaties and laws that they have ratified.
Right. That's the problem we have with the United Nations. You know, unilateralism, which Bush started, you know, and Trump is extending it beyond whatever Bush will imagine that will happen. Unilateralism caused a lot of problem. What do you call it? Iraq. Unilateralism rather than multilateralism violated United Nations Security Council's position and went alone. And they've been doing this because they think they have veto. And that's why the unjust world order still need to be fought for. We still don't have it. Unless we have that veto, you know, revised and see a way you can checkmate the unilateral use of force.
Especially by the superpowers.
Yes, the international community will still be witnessing what you can call chaos. And that is so sad, because that's the basis of the establishment of the United Nations.
Now, Prof, very quickly, in less than 60 seconds, I want you to just project ahead what Nigeria's foreign policy direction is likely to look like in the next 6 months, 1 year.
Well, I leave that for the experts. I will explain that I'm not in a position to project that, but we need more dynamism. We need more forward-looking actions. We need to also make sure we protect our citizens out there. They are trying. Since Abike Dabere from the house moved to be special, the issue of diaspora is taken care of, at least in terms of attention they're giving to them. So I believe that Nigeria is trying that. They need to do more. But let me say that there's something you forgot to add, that currently I'm a professor of public policy in University of Abuja. I'm in the Department of Public Administration. That's where I am currently. Okay. What you did was history. And in any case, we have a Department of International Relations here in the university. I don't belong there. I'm in the area of public administration. But because I'm a public policy specialist, and I also taught courses in this area in the past in post science, I can come to talk about this. But I'm not the real expert that you may expect.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Professor Isaac Obase, a professor of political science,
public administration,
and public administration, public policy issues is forte. So he has taught in a number of universities within and outside the country. In Botswana, for instance, in Southern Africa, in Sokoto, the Osman Danfodio University, and of course at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and currently at the University of Abuja here in the nation's capital. Thank you so much for finding time to join us.
It's a
well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. We look forward to having you again when we bring you a fresh edition of the program on Tuesday. Bye for now.